So excited for today's Power Lunch with Marilyn Sherman, Hall of Fame keynote speaker, motivational speaker for over 30 years, front row queen, hater of balcony seats. We'll get into that. Manifestation extraordinaire. We talked a little bit offline about how she manifested her husband, her French husband. Maybe we all can learn a little bit there. Champion for women in food, former corporate professional turned motivational icon, author of multiple books, pasta chef, New York Times Connections Master Solver, Marilyn Sherman. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
We were going through your LinkedIn and it wouldn't stop. And I was like, at some point, I was like, okay, we're going to put it in ChatGPT to summarize this.
Tube socks, boy, about to pop the lunchbox. Tube socks, boy, about to pop the...
You have had such an awesome career.
Well, I really love what I do. I mean, I love it so much that if I haven't spoken for a little while, my husband's like, Marilyn, are you sure you don't want to go out and get another keynote? Because I come home so high. I really love what I do.
You get energy from those things.
100%. That's why when the COVID hit and 100% of my business went to virtual, so I created a virtual studio here in my home office. The challenge was when I couldn't see anybody's faces and they disenabled the chat. Then it's just me. And I much prefer in-person audience. And if it has to be virtual, I much prefer an open chat so I can see all the comments and the questions and the reactions, because it's really about human connection.
Yeah, because like there's a flow that the audience gives you. Keep going, that's working, and you get this reassurance that Zoom just takes away completely.
Right. I know how important humor is, because when they're laughing, people are disarmed and then they're more likely to listen to key points. So it's hard to hear laughter on a Zoom or a Teams call.
Yeah, absolutely. I always tell on our call too, for some people to unmute themselves, because those noises, background noises, it's human and it makes the experience a little bit better.
Yes.
All right. So can we go back to Seattle, 80s?
Yeah.
You were a professional in a crisis center. You were taking on these calls. What kind of calls were you receiving?
It was a suicide prevention hotline call. So from midnight to 8, my job was to pick up the phone and answer whatever someone determines to be a crisis. And a crisis has a wide spectrum. So I had it all. So what that skill set enabled me to do today is to assess a crisis and then know how to handle it immediately.
Like, what happened between those phone calls and today you're one of the top motivational speakers in the space? Where you were doing those calls, you're like, hey, I can do this at scale. I can help more people.
Yes. So I used to say that I helped people to have the courage to live in suicide prevention. Now I help people live with courage to be their best selves and live their life in the front row. So I'm very fortunate, because it was instilled in me from a very young age to always have a vision. Where do you see yourself? Where do you see yourself next month, next year, 10 years? Tombstone goals, what are they? So when I saw my first motivational speaker when I was 16 years old in high school, I was like, I get it now. I get it. I want to be someone who motivates and inspires. And so I put that out there and I started to set goals and started to visualize for myself. And my dad said, great, you got to get a job first. And in order for you to get paid to speak, you have to have credibility. So get your education, get a college degree, get a job in the corporate environment, and eventually one day someone in the corporate world will pay you to hear you speak. So in the back of my mind, whatever job I took was always a stepping stone position to get me to where I am today.
That's incredible. And, we'll talk a lot about manifestation and visualizing, but how do you do it? Do you have a mood board? Do you write about it? Like, what is your go-to?
I love writing. I've been keeping journals forever and ever. I'm also a big goal board person, a vision board person. I've been doing that for years. That's why I always had an Eiffel Tower with a happy couple under it ever since I was in high school and in college. All my vision boards had an Eiffel Tower on it. And then eventually I met my Frenchie. And so my Christmas card the year after we got married was the Eiffel Tower with him and I underneath it. So I'm a big visual person. So I visualize. In fact, when I worked for a finance company and I worked in training and development, I was sent one of those seminar brochures. Come to the public seminar and hear the speakers, and here is what they say about those speakers. And I just cut out my picture and put it on top of the picture of the speaker that they had on these brochures. And then I changed their name to, they were saying these things about Marilyn. And then I put those around my office. Even though I had a full-time job in the corporate space, I knew I wanted to be a speaker. And then eventually the company that sent me those flyers hired me to be one of their speakers. So then those testimonials became a reality.
That is incredible and so powerful. So powerful. Did you tell them
So simple,
at that motivational talk? Did you mention this?
I have so many examples of manifestation and so many examples. Like, some people say, well, how did you get from a crisis counselor to Hall of Fame speaker? It's a great question that you're asking me. And here's what I really, really believe. You don't need to have all your ducks lined in a row in order for you to set out on your ultimate front row vision for your life. You just need to know what your end duck is. And if you know what your end duck is, then ducks will appear along the way. So I didn't know that this crisis counseling job would help me in my corporate job. I didn't know my corporate job had a training department. So I didn't know that I could move to the home office of the company that I worked for as a collector and became one of their trainers for their leadership training. And then I didn't know there were seminar companies that contracted speakers. I didn't know all of that, but it didn't matter because I knew what I ultimately wanted, my ultimate vision. And so all of these opportunities appeared along the way. So it wasn't luck. It was the putting it out there, having a clear vision, knowing what you wanted, and learning along the way, asking a lot of questions. Because I went to see a lot of speakers and I would sit in the front row and I would take voracious notes, and they would come up to me afterwards like, you are a great audience member. And I'm like, I want to do what you do for a living. What do I do? And they always gave me the same advice. Speak more. Every time you speak, you get better as a speaker, but you also hone your message and hone your stagecraft. So
yeah, you have so many metaphors around being an audience member and the seating chart itself, right? You talk about performers never settle for balcony seats and achieving a front seat or the front row in life. Yes. Let's dive into that a little bit. Like, how'd you come up with that? Because that makes so much sense. And also your acronym that you came up with, the S.E.A.T, SEAT.
Yes.
Would love to hear a little bit about that.
Oh, I love that. Well, the thing is, my first book, and this will date me, but my first book I wrote in 1998, and it was called Whose Comfort Zone Are You In? How to Lead the Life You Want and Be Happy Every Day. So it was about following your vision, following your path. Don't allow other people to tell you what you should do with your life. And my clients, especially my clients in the food industry space, they're like, we love that topic, but we've already heard it. What else you got? And so my clients in food service said, help us by giving us more. We want more Marilyn. And so I brainstormed with my mastermind group and they said, well, Marilyn, you're always in the front row. Why don't you pivot to that? And that was the beginning of me writing my next book, Why Settle for the Balcony? How to Get a Front Row Seat in Life. And then that evolved to Front Row Leadership. And I wrote a book, Front Row Service, How to Increase Your Tip Percentage and Check Average in Your Restaurant. And then I came up with this acronym, the SEAT of Success. And it's really easy to remember. And you see, I've got seats everywhere. I've got my seat necklace here. I've got my chairs.
I love that.
You choose where you sit in your life, metaphorically speaking or literally speaking. And the most successful people are very cognizant as to where they sit and who they sit with. So the S is to see the outcome you desire, that visualization piece. You got to see it first. The E is not about time management. It is about energy management, especially people in the food service space. You are 24/7. So you have to protect your energy. Some people are night owls. Some people are early risers. It doesn't matter. You need to know what your high energy time is, and then do not waste high energy time doing low value activities. The A in the SEAT of Success acronym is all about attitude. People do business with people that they know, like, and trust. People know people and like people and trust people more if they have a positive, optimistic attitude. You always hire for attitude and train for skill. And then the T is all about the road to success is never an easy path. We're going to have obstacles along the way. So the T stands for you have to have your tenacity at max capacity to handle any adversity. So that's my SEAT of Success acronym.
I love it. I think it's so great. And when you talk about hospitality, seating the guests, it just makes so much sense and it's so easy to remember. How'd you get involved with hospitality? Also, why did you get involved with hospitality? It's a tough business.
Well, the thing is, my message of motivation and inspiration and helping people have more courage to be the best version of themselves, it's industry agnostic. I mean, I speak to insurance companies, I speak to banks, I speak to universities, I'm all over the place. But back in 2004, I filled out a call for proposal to speak at the Women's Food Service Forum, which is filled with women who are dedicated to the food service industry. So these are restaurants, these are manufacturers, distributors, anybody and everybody that has anything to do with the food service space, hospitality, restaurants. And so they chose me and I spoke at their conference. To say I hit it out of the park is an understatement. because I filled in for another speaker because I was already going to be there. She had an emergency, and people were like, I know I'm covering for another speaker. I'm not officially on till tomorrow, but come see this speech. And there was so much word of mouth from that speech that my room set for 400 people had 700 people in it. And as a result of that one conference, I had 19 speaking engagements, spins. So I was doing all the Cisco houses, all the US food organizations. I mean, I was doing Aramark and Sodexo and Cisco. I mean, I was like all over the place, plus McDonald's and Pepsi and Coke and Burger King. So that's how I got into it. And then the Women's Food Service Forum hired me again for 12 years in a row. My exposure to all areas in the food service space really helped, build my speaking business in the hospitality space because of that one event.
That's amazing. Not only are you a fantastic speaker, which but also you simplify things in a way that it sticks to you. As I was doing research, one of the things you said was, if you look at your company, you can identify people into 3 buckets: victim, vacationers, or volunteers.
Yes.
I love that. And I'm just like, it's easy to remember. You get it before she explains it, but I would love for you to dive into, what you meant by, people are either a victim, vacationer, or a volunteer.
Well, that's a very good question, because when I left the corporate world, my finance company was purchased by another bank. And so after I left, they rehired me to help them with the transition from this finance company and this bank to be one team. And I did a workshop called, Are You a Victim, a Vacationer, or a Volunteer when it comes to change? And it worked so well that I use that as a workshop offering, because usually people hire me for a motivational keynote presentation or a plenary session at a conference, but then they also have me do a workshop, like a breakout on managing change for optimal results. And I do that same change activity in the same victim, vacation, volunteer. And do you know that after the pandemic, I'm telling you, more and more of my customers want the change piece. So I do a hybrid of my front row success and this change piece, because human nature, when you're faced with change and uncertainty, which the entire world was faced with during the pandemic, you either default to a victim where you sit back and you're like, oh my gosh, they don't know what they're doing. I don't have a voice. They're never going to ask me. Mark my words. This change is going to fail. It'll never work. That's a victim mentality. And when you have that mentality, then you behave a certain way. You don't speak up in meetings. You only talk with your friends after the meeting is over. Your language changes. You say sure, and then you don't do it because you're like, oh, it's never going to happen. And then it has an effect on the rest of the team. Morale goes down, productivity goes down, and then resentment goes up because other people have to pick up the pace for the victim. Then there's the vacationer. And this is the, hey, what's going on? Hey, can you do me a favor? These are the kind of people who react to change with, you know what? I'm not going to be proactive. I'm just going to sort of wait till the dust settles and they can tell me what to do and they can tell me when to do it. And if I'm challenged or charged with something, I'll just see if I can get someone else to help me out. So a vacationer is the kind of person you have to be very careful of, because they're just flying under the radar. They're not bad enough to get fired, but they're certainly not, resourceful. These people, of course, behave differently. They talk differently. And as a result, morale goes down and resentment goes up. And then there's the volunteer, which is what we all want to be. We all want to be resourceful. We want to have a can-do attitude. We have a belief that change does not equate loss. Change can be good. Change can be a new way of doing business. I mean, some of my restaurant clients decided to do delivery when they didn't do delivery before the pandemic. And those restaurants, their profits went through the roof because they were willing to adapt and to change what their customers needed. So a volunteer is someone who has that positive attitude. They're resourceful, so they look to others to come together and let's help out. And I have an idea and let's brainstorm and what's another alternative. And because of that attitude and mindset and language, obviously they're going to behave different, be much more collaborative and cooperative, and they increase the chances of any success or any change to be a success. Now, here's what's so funny about this. All my audiences, 100%, after going through this entire activity, they say, of course, we want to be volunteers. Of course, we already are. And then I have them do an interactive activity, and 95% of them default to victim. So it's human nature. And they say, I can't do anymore. I don't have enough. I'm vulnerable. And it's like clockwork every single time. And I ask the question at the end, and a light bulb goes off, and there's an audible like, oh, Oh, I get it. I ask, how many of you, when I asked you to go through this change, how many of you asked someone else in this room to help you? And they're like, I didn't know we could do that. Well, that's human nature. So the bottom line is you can't complain about your organization being in silos if you are the silo.
That's so powerful. And one part that you said that resonated with something Steve Jobs said, which is it's A players and C players are easy to work with. It's the B players you're unsure about and that, go on under the radar for a long time. So really resonated with, what you meant in terms of the folks that are vacationers.
Vacationers, yeah. They're dangerous.
You have an incredible life. The life you have today, is it beyond your manifestation? Is this better than what you manifested? Or or you have more to go?
Well, I really do love my life. And I never want to say I've arrived and I've made it, because my dad used to say, when you're green, you grow, but when you're ripe, you rot. So I never want to say I've made it, I've arrived. There's always more to learn. There's always more to have. There's always bigger audiences. Like my big dream is to have one company have me do like this 12-city tour and just go and see all these locations. So everybody in the organization, these large organizations, can all hear the message in a very close amount of time. So I'm dreaming of that. And I'm dreaming of stadium tours. And so I'm not there yet. And there's always room for growth. But I had no idea. On my list, I wanted to manifest, because I had a bad relationship in my past. I call it a starter marriage. And I decided to practice what I preach and come up with a list of everything I wanted in a partner. Came up with 356 traits, narrowed it down to the top 10. And in the top 10, he had to speak fluent French. Well, I far exceeded my expectations with the choice of my husband, because it ended up that he was the most kind, big-hearted, amazing human being. And he just happens to be French, and he happens to be a French baron. So he has access to so many incredible people in France. And of course, we have to go there every year to visit family and friends. So now I have life. It's a whole world of people and experiences that I never would have had I stayed in my comfort zone in my first marriage.
That's amazing. 300 plus. You were detailed. You went in deep. We looked at the list.
Well, the thing is, to be honest, I was rock climbing in Bangor, Maine, and we got rained out. So one of my rock climbing partners and I were sitting in a pizzeria waiting for the weather to clear, and she was tired of me complaining about my current boyfriend. So she said, well, what do you want? And I said, well, I really like this. And so she wrote it down, and she said, well, what does that look like? And I said, it looks like this and this and this and this. And she said, what else? And she kept asking those questions, and she kept writing it down. And so I have this napkin, and I still have it, of all these things that I wanted. And then I took it home, and then I narrowed it down. Okay, what's really most important to me? And I came up with my top 10 list.
I'm going to make my list right after this.
Absolutely. I believe in a list. I believe in a list.
Amy Holm introduced us, and you recently spoke at the LEAD event in Denver. Would love to hear a little bit about what was your message to that group there.
My message was the same message I give to my audiences, that you choose where you sit in your life. And your front row is your front row. And you need to have boundaries around who you let into your front row. Where you sit and who you sit with is imperative to your success. So look at the people you hang around with. And I'm getting goosebumps at the thought of it. It's okay to invite people to be loved from your balcony. You have to set these boundaries for yourself. So I explained what it means to live your life in the front row and to be a front row leader and to be someone who ultimately, when you're living your best life, when you are fulfilling your dreams, when you are being positive and optimistic and protecting your energy from all those outside influences that do not serve you, eventually the best seat in the house is for you to be an usher. Because if you come to Vegas where I live, and if you go to a show, and I hope you do, I guarantee you there will be an usher with two things. Number one, they'll have knowledge of all the seats in the house. And number two, they have a flashlight where they look at your ticket and they say, follow me. And they literally illuminate the path through the darkness to the seat that's on your ticket. And that's what leaders do. They illuminate the path for others to get to their front row seat. And so my message to them was, people are watching you. They're inspired by you. So how do you want to continue to illuminate the path for the people that work for you?
That's absolutely beautiful. I have a question for you. I was reading about all the different speaking engagements you did. Yeah. You did one in Saudi Arabia. I think it was the largest women university.
You did your homework.
We had so much stuff on you. We got through 10% of the question. So how was that? And how did you succeed in telling your story? Because there's so much being lost in translation. How did you still speak to all of them?
It's very interesting because I go to an economic summit every year in Aix-en-Provence, and my husband's best friend runs it, and they're key players. And he didn't really know what I did for a living because they don't have a lot of motivational speakers in France. But when he came to visit us, he watched a whole keynote and he's like, oh my gosh, I get it now. So the next time you come to Provence, I want you to come up with a list of all the speakers we're bringing in, heads of state, heads of organizations, heads of companies, and I'm going to introduce you to them so that you could see about expanding your work. And so we had a whole plan, a whole manifestation. I did a little, QR code on my business card, a little bit in French, inviting them to my demo video. I met the president of the largest women's STEM university in the world. It's in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. And it was Princess Nourah bint Abdulrahman University. And I met the president in Provence and we connected. And you know how you meet somebody and you have an instant chemistry? So we connected, we jumped on a Zoom call a couple months later, and she said, we have to bring you to Saudi Arabia. And they were celebrating their 15th year as a university. So they were having the architects who built the university at this gala. And she said, we want you to speak for 10 minutes at this gala. So I talked about how Princess Nourah was a connector. She was compassionate and she was smart. And I said, the architects of this building probably had no idea how much they were going to impact the world because of every single individual that went to school here and did the labs and did the tests and learned from the professors. They're all going out and making a difference in the world. So you and I can be just like Princess Nourah because we are the architects of our own lives. So when I told them I would come and do this 10-minute speech, I said, you're bringing me all the way to Saudi Arabia. Why don't you use me? Because when I speak at High Point University, I speak to all the freshman class, but then I speak to the sales department and I speak to the fellows and I speak to the entrepreneur classes. So I said, use me. So they invited me to do my keynote presentation, The Seed of Success, to all the deans of all the colleges at the university. And part of my limited thinking mind was, I don't know if my message will translate to these women in Saudi Arabia. And my fears were unfounded. All of these PhDs, they were all taking notes on the edge of their seats. And the president got up after my keynote and said, oh my gosh, I'm your leader, but here's what I learned today. See, there's room for all of us to continue to learn and grow. And she just went through all of her notes. So it was my favorite event of the year so far because it was a whole nother culture. It was a whole nother country I'd never been to before. But it also reminded me I had been thinking too small because I know I crush it in the US. I know I crush it with FoodService. I know I crush it with women's leadership conferences. I know that, but I didn't know that I could crush it outside of our borders. So it really helped me expand my own mind.
That is amazing. And I think energy is universal. And I think your energy is radiating. And I just want to go run a marathon after this. So I can only imagine how it was in person in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. So I love that. I love that was your favorite event of the year.
So far, yep.
I'm going to end with something that I think we all need to hear, which is, this is great advice, but I'm sure you struggle with taking your own advice as well, right? I'm sure you struggled and you wrestled. Any anecdote or story for us last time you struggled to give yourself the front row because maybe family was involved or, you just were not ready or it was too hard?
Well, for those who have known me in the food service industry for a long time, they know that I've struggled with food addiction. And so I've always had a goal to have this certain weight and I was always struggling. And in fact, I wrote a book called Is There a Hole in Your Bucket List? Because one day I woke up after once again yo-yoing and in 1 year I put on 35 pounds. I'm like, why do I keep putting holes in my own bucket list? And then I thought, that'd be a great title of a book. So I literally, good timing, on Saturday, I finally reached my goal weight, which is like a 70-pound.
Congrats.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So I think this time around, I asked for help because shame kept me in the dark for so long. It's like, how can you be a motivational speaker and still have this hidden addiction that shows up on stage? And so I asked for help. And then I was ready and I said, okay, I'll do whatever it takes. And because I was able to ask for help, I got the help I needed. And then I have a group of supporters that are in my front row. There's 3 other women with my same issue. And we text each other every single day to support each other. And that has made a world of difference. So I don't have to be an island unto myself trying to make it in the world. I can acknowledge my weaknesses and I can acknowledge that I need help. And then every single day, I'm so grateful for the help that I get.
That is incredible. And I think it's a very important message for everyone to take away, because if someone like you struggled and overcame, obviously, I think the rest of us are allowed to as well. And being vulnerable is a superpower. So I just appreciate our conversation. And I have so many things I want to go do now because of this 20, 30-minute call. But
so
that
happy.
was very contagious, very, very contagious.
I'm so happy. My work here is done.
Done. I hope we can send this to as many people as possible. And I understand why Amy wanted us to chat now.
Oh, good. Well, if there's anyone on your list that has a conference or a convention or a GM conference or a franchise conference, I am available.
Well, listen, I'm not kidding, but we have a conference coming ourselves at Lunchbox, and I would love to talk to you about that offline. But this was awesome.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and congratulations on all of your success. I mean, you sound already that you're like a go-getter, and you go out and you go from 0 to 60, just like that. So congratulations on all of your success.
No, thank you so much, and thank you for making some time for us.
My pleasure.
To fly with me. Tube socks, boy, about to pop the lunchbox. Tube socks, boy.